I mean that those interests who own, who run, who rule the economy and the political structure of this country are now terribly alarmed that the Negro's upsurge for equal rights and for the abolition of the badge of color, which Mr. Farmer referred to just a minute ago, may result in a grave destruction of the status of the United States and its economy. It could result in serious damage to the image of the United States abroad. A very interesting statement was made characterizing this threat. An organization was formed just a week ago by Negro intellectuals and a couple of political people. And the man who formed it said, it is now easier and it will become far more simpler to persuade and prevail upon the legislators in Congress to pass civil rights legislation because the danger, the menace to the system here, to American society, is great and serious. And he put it this way: the white man is afraid that the Negro is going to tear up the pea patch of America. Mr. Farmer?
Well, I too think that the Negro's revolutionary struggle is a part of a historical process. We see a worldwide struggle for freedom, and Negroes could not escape becoming a part of that. This struggle is going on in Africa, in Asia, it's going on all over the world. And certainly the Negro American was bound to come to the point where he asked, what about this American faith and what about these tenets of democracy? Don't they apply to me? And if not now, when? I think that in historical terms we can date the new militancy of the Negro back to World War II, when Negro boys in uniform were fighting against the master race theory of Hitlerism. Of course, they were bound to ask themselves, what about the master race theory back in Alabama and Mississippi? Shouldn't I fight against that just as hard? I think another reason for the evolving militancy is the increasing education of Negro youth. As one of the Negro sit-in leaders replied when he was asked back in 1960 what accounted for the difference between his father and himself. He said, well, Pop had only the Bible. I've got the Bible and the college education. How are you going to teach a man about the tenets of American democracy without expecting that at some point he will ask, don't these things mean me? If not, now when? A third factor that has created the new revolution is, of course, the emerging nations of Africa. Negroes have gotten a greater sense of identity and identification and a greater sense of pride as a result of it. You can only push a man around so long, and this has encouraged Negroes to demand that the pushing around stop. Now then there have come the sit-ins, the freedom rides, before that Montgomery, the bus boycott under Dr. King's leadership, now Birmingham. So it's like a miasma now, north and south. Negroes are saying not tomorrow, not next week, but now.
Of course, what I'd like to do is get back in just a moment after we take a break to the questions that you gentlemen have raised, particularly the one that Mr. Morrison raises about this effort of the power structure in this country, as you say, to contain the struggle that you are discussing, Mr. Farmer. But let's just take a break and we'll be back to that subject in a moment. Mr. Farmer, let's go back to this matter that Mr. Morrison raised about the power structure in this country wanting to contain, and I presume that means restrain, the struggle for equality of the Negro. How do you react to that notion?
Well, I think the power structure in the United States is no different from any other power structure, and power structures always try to protect their position and try to avoid trouble. They don't want trouble. They want to contain it as much as possible. To illustrate that, in Greensboro, North Carolina, after massive demonstrations and after 1,500 arrests, we were asked to stop, just stop. Of course, we refused to do that, and they finally offered us 2 theaters desegregated if we would agree not to demonstrate against anything else. And presumably this meant till the end of time. Well, needless to say, we could not accept that, because what we're asking for now is complete desegregation of everything. We're asking for an open city. Now, power structures always have to be prodded, And I think that if we continue to prod the power structure of the United States, as we're doing it now with marching feet, and by sitting in, with a demand for freedom, such as a picket line that is going on up in Harlem now, protesting unemployment and discrimination in the building trades, we will continue to prod the power structure so that the economic part of the power structure will realize that the choice is between granting the demands, the legitimate demands of Negroes, or going out of business.
Yes, but when you talk about power structure, I think now of the national government, and I think of President Kennedy's speech on Tuesday night. I think of more than a locality, more than the particular economic interests involved. And I wonder whether you gentlemen feel that basically the American power structure, in all of its ramifications and implications, seeks to contain or restrain this.
Before Minister Malcolm takes off on this, let me make another comment with regard to the administration. The administration's position in the past 3 years has been to try to contain it, to stop the trouble. In the Freedom Ride, we were asked to stop and cool off. This has been the response of the administration at all times. But now, as there is growing momentum to the revolution, the administration is being pulled along. And I hope they'll be pulled along enough so that they'll take the lead and actually do something constructive.
Well, let me, Malcom X, if I may, let me pursue this just a moment, Mr. Farmer. When you talk about the administration, when you talk about containment, are you talking about containing the acts of violence or near violence, or are you talking about containing the Negro's effort to secure for himself the equality that is the birthright of all people?
We're talking about containing the militant struggle. Stop what you are doing, and let's go back to the old way of doing it by sitting around the table and parceling out a few minor steps here and there. But this is not enough any longer.
But do you think that this reflects a basic refusal to accept the development of the Negro's position?
Well, I think in part it's a refusal or a failure to recognize the intensity of the demands. Now, I think that that recognition is coming. I think that the administration is beginning to recognize it. The speech of the president recently on civil rights indicates that. But this is because the pressure is kept up. And I fear that if the pressure relaxes now, that the tendency of the power structure to move will decline. That's why we intend to keep up the pressure, as I'm sure the other gentlemen here do.
Malcom X, I think perhaps we ought to turn to Malcom X, who wanted to comment on that.
Yes, on this white power structure. When you say power structure, I know you mean the white power structure, because that's all we have in America. And the white power structure today is just as much interested in perpetuating slavery as the white power structure was 100 years ago. Only now they use modern methods of doing so. And realizing that the black people in this country are waking up and becoming filled with a desire to be looked upon as men and as human beings, the white power structure, to slow down that struggle for freedom and human dignity, uses tricks. 100 years ago they could do it with chains. Today they use tricks. And one of the tricks that they've invented is this token integration. To get Negro, so-called Negro leaders to accept a few token crumbs of integration that don't solve any problem for the masses of black people in this country whatsoever, but it does make the hand-picked Negroes be satisfied, to slow down the cry of the masses. And a good example of that is, as soon as the spirit of rebellion or revolution began to spread among the masses of black people in this country, and they began to take an active part, and they showed that they weren't confined to this nonviolent approach, then the government or the power structure began to sit up and take notice. And now, as you said earlier, the president is talking about new legislation and to put it, take it out of the streets and put it back in the courts. Well, as long as it's in the streets, it's in the hands of the masses of black people who will not compromise or who cannot be bought out. But when you put it back in the courts, then that puts it back into the hands of the hand-picked Negro leaders, who will allow the judges and the other persons that are involved in this white power structure to slow them down. It's only a trick. And as long as the masses of black people are involved in the struggle for freedom, not integration, but freedom, and respect as human beings, respect as men, and show that they're willing to die to be respected as men, then the power structure sits up and takes